Hello everyone and welcome to another build time-lapse video. Today I will showcase my first entry into the annual Kibo competition. In the past I was always a bit intimidated to join, as I always pictured Kibo as an intensely challenging competition due to the level of skill demonstrated by many of the competitors. This time, however, I relieved myself of the expectation of having to win, which helped to get rid of some of the pressure I had felt about attending previously. As this year's Kibo theme was culinary creations, I started brainstorming some ideas about food-related builds. Dr. Bond, the competition host, had made a comment about how it doesn't have to be food in the literal sense. He mentioned that it could be something like a demon eating souls or a cyberpunk chef cutting holographic salmon. Somehow this comment stuck with me, and I thought it would be somewhat funny to combine the two ideas somehow. That is when the final piece of my theme's puzzle came into place. I would go on to make a Japanese themed build. This would allow me to take elements of the two ideas and recontextualize them. The main idea I wanted to represent here is the connection between the ancestral spirits and the modern world through food. Here I plan out the various appliances in the noodle kitchen. After building the noodle kitchen, I decided the spirit would benefit from being much larger, especially seeing as this is an organics competition. Here I spend a bit of time smoothing out the spirit's kabuki type mask by hand. I also decide to make a silhouette of a bonsai tree over the red sun symbol on his mask. I make some wooden support beams for the roof of the noodle kitchen. Here I make a tile design for the floor. I rotate the kitchen by 15 degrees to give it a little extra flavor. I then make some pots and pans that I also rotate. Now I paste in the corrugated roof panels onto the frame that I made earlier. I wanted to add a bit of graffiti to the build, so I decided on this wave design that's heavily inspired by the famous Great Wave of Kanagawa painting. I also added a synthwave style sun. Now I make some neon signs. Unfortunately I lost some footage here and there, so I don't have all the progress recorded. I mess around with using end rods, but found them to be too noisy to work well with these signs. Here I make a sign using the kanji character for noodles. For the third and final sign, I wanted to have a noodle bowl shape. I thought it'd be cool to have the sign be hexagonal as well. I lost some footage of building the noodle chef initially, but building an organic at this size and scale was pretty challenging for me as I had to pack in more detail in a much smaller space. After I had finished the chef to my liking, I tested him out in the kitchen and I realized he was still too large, so I had to scale him down, much to my dismay. After a while I managed to make him look okay, even at the reduced scale. Here I make some saliva coming out of the tongue of the massive spirit. Now I work on making some industrial support beams for the neon signs. I then put the beams into place to connect the signs to the roof. Now it's time to work on a few different floaty Shinto related items, starting with two different stone lantern designs. I paste the lanterns into the composition, rotating them like I did many of the other static items to give a sense of dynamism. At this point I also start sculpting some clouds. Here I make some toenails and fingernails. Alright, the next item on the list is a traditional torii gate. I definitely wanted to make one of these as it represents the connection point between the spirit and mortal realms, which is exactly what I'm going for here. Now I start working on the nine-tailed kitsune or fox spirit. Like many things in East Asia, this fox has significance across multiple cultures in the area. I put a lot of attention onto the fox's head. I really like how it turned out, and I think this might be one of the highlights of the build. I realized that the tails were slightly small compared to the rest of the body, so I redid them. The side effect of this would be that it would be hard to place the fox into the composition without clipping into other things. I lost a bit more footage here, but I made a taiko drum in this ramen bowl. At this point the competition deadline was drawing near, so I had to move on to the texturing phase. I used easy edits to create the base textures and fix them up a bit later on. For this bench I used noise patterns to give a texture of moss and lichen on the surface of the stone. I then give the stone itself a separate noise pattern. Here I go around the build, continuing to adjust the textures as I see fit. One more thing I want to add to the composition is some holographic marine life to add to the cyberpunk feeling of the noodle stand. I make a whale and fish shape and replace the blocks with glass panes to give the appearance of colorful holograms. Once again I continue to work on the texturing. Honestly, I sort of wish I had more time on this part, but the amount of time I spent on the shape and composition, combined with me being fairly busy around New Year's time, meant that I didn't have much time for this part. I finish off this build with some last minute texturing and some added beverage cans to the refrigerator. And with that, the build is complete. Hello, thank you so much for watching all the way to this point. As usual, I haven't released the download for this or most of my other builds, but I have some plans to potentially release my Patreon. So if you'd like any of the builds you see in my videos, just continue to show your support and maybe I'll find the motivation to release it soon. Hope you all have a great rest of your day, and until next time, bye.